Hello, everybody, and welcome to my next episode of From Profits to Properties, where I help you to build your business to profits beyond what your expectations, and then help you to invest those profits into building long-term wealth through real estate. So 2 topics every single week. First topic is going to be about business. Second topic is about building wealth through real estate. So we're going to talk about DISC and DOCS, D-I-S-C and D-O-C-S. So DISC is the business topic. And if you don't know what DISC is a way to categorize behavioral styles. So behavioral styles in DISC is D for dominance or driver, I for influencer, S for steadiness, and C for conscientiousness or compliance, D-I-S-C. And you're never any one particular of these things. I'm going to start out, first of all, encouraging you, if you've never taken a DISC evaluation before, some people call it a DISC test. It's not a test. But if you never taken an evaluation before, Tony Robbins, the Tony Robbins, has a free version of it that you can take on his website. So just search Tony Robbins DISC, D-I-S-C test or DISC assessment, and it'll come up and you can take a free DISC test. Obviously, they're using it as a lead magnet to capture your information because if you're interested in DISC and how psychology works, then you're probably interested in some of the things that he and his company have to sell. So they're providing value while getting an opportunity to collect your information and market to you later. That's how the world goes around. So why does DISC matter? First of all, it's about understanding the nature of someone and where they predominantly focus. I don't know if I'm saying that the right way, but let me just give you a breakdown of it. D is the dominant person. They're very driven, they're very direct, they're very results focused. So a high D is like the type A personality. I'm in charge, tell me what I need to know, no fluff, let's move forward and get it done. Okay. I is the influencer. That is somebody who's very social, very enthusiastic and persuasive. S is steady Eddie. About 75% of the people who take this evaluation come out as an S. That is normal that the average person is steady Eddie. They're calm, they're loyal, they're people-oriented, but they don't like change. They want things to stay the same. And then C is people who are conscientious or compliance-driven. They're very detailed focused, they're very analytical, they're very cautious, they want to cross their I's and dot their T's. Now, there's 2 areas in which these DISC evaluations really, really matter. They matter in sales and they matter in people management. Okay, so I want you to think about it in both ways. I want you to think about it from a sales perspective. When you are in a sales situation, you've heard me say this before, if you've listened to any of my podcasts, that if you are running a business, you are a salesperson. Do not think you're not in sales. Every single one of us is in sales every single day. So when you're in sales, you have to think through what is the other party, what is the other person's style, and why does it matter? Well, when you understand their style, you can build trust faster with them. It can reduce friction and objections. It can help you tailor your pitch to make sure that you're getting the decision made by the right person at the right time, and you can create stronger relationships and close more deals. So that's really, really important. Now, how do you handle this, or how do you use this in people management? Well, it's about understanding your employees. Matter of fact, it had to be 10 years ago. I should do this again. Instead we're virtual a lot right now, but let me explain. So about 10 years ago, I was assigned by a coach to do DISC tests for all of my staff members. And so everybody got a DISC test done. And then we did a DISC evaluation and we put it up on the outside of their door or outside of their cubicle. And it would remind you of who the person was that you were coming to talk with. And so when somebody, first of all, I am a high D, high I. Okay. My S and my C are pretty low. So I am a high driver. I get things done. I want to move forward and get it done. And I'm a high I. My I is actually relatively lower naturally, but I can push myself to a high I because truthfully, I am an introvert, but I know that I can't be an introvert and be successful in business. And therefore I force myself to be extroverted so that my I moves up. There's actually a traditional style and an adaptive style. I might be wrong on what the traditional is called, but adaptive means you can be a chameleon and you can transform yourself into being this other person. For me, my I is a lot lower and my D is higher. And when my I comes up, my D comes down. So I have the ability to be more influential, be more of an extrovert, do podcasts like this, but then my D starts to drop. And so it's a whole pattern of how you can look at this. But what we did in our team is we had everybody put this on their door. Now today you can do that with ChatGPT. Once you get the results of the disc test, you can put everybody's disc test into ChatGPT and you can say, create for me the top 5 bullet points of how everyone should interact with this person based upon their disc profile. So I remember, people walking into my desk and they would read on the door that says, "Hey, be pretty direct with bullet points. Don't share too much of the story." Well, that was really important to me because for me, I get lost in the story. You start telling me the story and I get bored, and I want to just know, hey, help me understand what's the bottom line. Now, there was somebody else on my team who was a super high I, and I'd be like, "Hey, what? So what ended up happening?" And she's like, "I'm getting to that," and I'd wait a couple minutes, and the story would keep going. And then finally, I knew and I recognized I had to let her finish the story. She was a high I. And if she didn't finish the story, she didn't feel heard. And so on her sheet, it said, "Let me finish the story." It's about understanding who that person is and understanding what their needs are. So if you're coming needing something from me, don't come to me with a story. You're not going to put me in a good place where you're going to get what I want. But if I need something from you and you're a super high I naturally, then I need to let you finish the story. I need you to let you get to the point at the end of the story versus I'm going to get to the point at the beginning of the story and only fill in the necessary details. So it's really important to understand somebody's disc style. Okay, it's important in sales, it's important in people management, it's important in life, and it's important to start with yourself. So if you've never taken a disc assessment, now is the time to do it. So if you haven't done it before, go Google Anthony Robbins, Tony Robbins disc assessment. You can get a free copy. I encourage you to not only do it yourself, but have anybody on your team that works very, very closely do it, and then upload each person's results into ChatGPT and say, "Hey, help me create a sign for this person's door. What bullet points should I put on here on how to interact with me, given this being my disc profile?" So that will really help you to interact better with people and really help you to understand who they are and them understand who you are, because the key to getting what you want is to communicate in the style that the other person wants to hear it. And so you want to mirror them. You want to adjust your language. You want to adjust your pitch. And so if you're talking to somebody who is a high D, focus on the outcomes and be confident. If you're talking to someone who's in a high I, make it fun, highlight people, talk about the impact, talk about the environment, talk about who's involved. If you're talking to somebody who's an S, you want to build trust and you want to avoid sudden changes. Remember, they're steady Eddie. They like what they're doing and they want to keep doing it. And so just give them a clear path, build trust with them and avoid sudden changes. And if you're talking to somebody who's a high C, provide proof, follow a clear process, give them all of the details that they need. Give them, if they're working for you, give them structure. They crave structure. They loathe disorganization, and they need an environment where they know what to expect and they know what's expected of them. All of these things are critical for you to be able to drive your business to the next level and to achieve sales and management success beyond your wildest dreams. Thanks so much for listening to the first half. We're going to pause for a quick second here for a quick commercial break, and I'm going to come back at the second half and talk about docs, D-O-C-S. Talk to you in a second. Hello, friends. I just want to interrupt our episode today really quickly to talk to you about our multi-unit property loan program. We can loan on up to 10 units of residential properties, and as a matter of fact, even commercial use of some of that space is allowed, as long as it's restaurants, retail, or office space, and that it is less than 49% or up to 49% of the space, and the rest of it is going to be residential units. We can lend with as little as 25% down payments, and we don't care about your income for anything other than the rental income from the property. These properties typically cash flow really, really well. So if you're looking to expand your portfolio, look beyond just 4-unit properties and get yourself to 5 or 8 or even 10 units through my multi-unit investment property program. Hey everybody, welcome back to the second half of the podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you got something out of DISC, and I hope you can implement that into your business. But we're talking about 4-letter words today that start with D, and the second 4-letter word today that starts with D is docs. So what is docs talking about? I'm talking about having your documents in a row, having your documents logically line up when you go to apply for a mortgage. Now, this is about how to build wealth through real estate. Well, you can't build wealth if you don't get qualified. And more often, I'm finding that people kind of haphazardly handle documents, and I get it. I do the same thing sometimes. But the key is understanding that you can't wait until the last minute to get your documents lined up. There are so many stories I can tell you about people in so many different situations where we've ended up at the last minute finding out their documents are not lined up, that they're not in a row. And oftentimes they've come to me with a property already in contract. They're, hey, oh, by the way, I want to get started on this transaction. And I start peeling back the layers of the onion and realize your documents are not in a row. And it's very challenging for business owners in particular, because as a business owner, you have a lot more creativity, you have a lot more flexibility than an employee of yours has in how they're paid or how their paperwork is written up. That's great. That's one of the big benefits of being a business owner, but it's also one of the biggest struggles. It's one of the biggest challenges. And so my first encouragement is when you go to or think you're going to want to start investing in real estate, whether it be a primary home, an investment property, a vacation home, talk to somebody, talk to a mortgage professional early in the process, because you've got to outline what are you trying to accomplish and what does your paperwork look like today. I had a client 7 years ago, super frustrated, saying, John, I don't get it. I was referred to you by one of my employees who said all she had to do was give you a paycheck stub and a W-2 and a bank statement. She got her mortgage. She makes way less money than I do. She works for me. And you guys are doing like a full forensic audit on me, going through all my different paperwork. Why is it so much easier for my employee to get a loan than it is for me? And it kind of made me pause for a second. I said, I hadn't thought about it that way, but the truth is your employee is kind of a guaranteed income. And he said, well, no, she's not. Like, I could fire her tomorrow. And I said, yes, but what she's doing, she's not the only one that can do that. And he goes, no, that's why I could fire her. That guy was a little bit of a hothead. And I said, okay, but she could also find work somewhere else doing the same thing, making similar money. And he thought for a second. He goes, yeah, you're right. And I said, so it's a transferable skill that is reasonably marketable to make a similar earning. He said, okay, yeah, I get that. Then as a lender, we're not so worried about it, because what you're making today, you're probably going to make tomorrow. Whether you make it with the current employer or you make it with somebody else, there is a high likelihood that you're going to continue making similar or more money, because typically you're going to see pay raises each year. He said, okay, I can see that, but I'm in control of my income. Why is this so much harder for me to get a mortgage when I'm the one that's running the business and I'm bringing in millions of dollars? And I said, well, you're also spending millions of dollars. As a matter of fact, you're showing that you make zero profit. And he goes, oh, no, that's just for the IRS. And I said, that's great. It's great for your taxes. It's great that you're not paying more money than you need to in taxes. But it's not so great when it comes to you qualifying for a mortgage, because the federal government is backing all of these loans. The federal government is behind all of the mortgages and is how do I want to say this? They are the decisioning factor, and they're not going to let you count income that you're not paying to them in taxes. And so he started to get an understanding of it. I said, look, here's the deal. If you lose this job, if this industry, if this company shuts down, can you make the same amount of money just going to work for someone else? He goes, well, of course not. I said, that's the thing right there. So that's what mortgage lenders care about, is you control more of your destiny and more of your outcome. And so there's a lot more risk involved. That's the first thing. The second part of it is, how do we really know how much money you make? Because you have the flexibility to play the shell game with your income and to move things around. And so we have to look at the documents. Now, are there other ways to get you approved without having to see tax returns? Of course there are. There's bank statement loans, but we still look at documents. I had a client recently who we were doing a loan, and there was no proof of income required, but we had documents that weren't lining up on their LLC. And there was a difference in the owners in the operating agreement versus the owners at the Secretary of State's website. And the client asked me why it's such a big deal. And I said, because they have to match. We have to know who are the owners, because the owners have to sign the loan documents. And if we don't clearly know who the owners are, then we have to ask and we have to put everything on pause. And so we had to, in that case, make a decision of, hey, well, we're going to try and change it at the Secretary of State's website, or just write an amendment to the operating agreement and get it notarized. And so we did, and everything went fine. But it's about your documents lining up. It's about having all your ducks in a row, all your docs in a row. And it's hard because you don't know what we're looking for. Matter of fact, it's even harder because 40, 50, 60% of my peers don't even know what we're looking for. And so you're going into an environment where you're about to trust your ability to complete this transaction on someone that may or may not actually understand how to read the paperwork you're showing them. And so it is important to figure out, am I working with the right professional? And I don't have a simple way to tell you how, because tenure certainly doesn't mean anything. I know a lot of people who've been in this industry for as long as I have, been doing this for 25 years, and they don't know anything about the paperwork. They just know, I don't know, my team handles that. It's kind of scary. Okay, but it's the reality is A, you've got to pick a good professional. B, you've got to start the process early and make sure that your paperwork is lined up. And then C, you need to be flexible and prepared to fix things as we go on the fly. Because whether it's something your loan officer missed, whether it's something that just came up at the end that we couldn't have known about, the fact is, no matter how much we try and line up your docs, this is a flawed process. The mortgage industry was blamed for collapsing the global economy back in 2008, and the weight of the federal government came down upon us. And so we're now dealing with all of that regulation, and it hasn't gotten much easier since then. We've also got challenges going on with economic conditions, and the global economy is on shaky ground. And so it's putting us in a position where the banking industry is concerned, and there are no desire to loosen things up. And so accept the fact that, hey, when things are hard, fewer people are going to do it, which makes it often the best opportunity and the best time for you to move forward and make it happen. So hopefully this has been helpful, just in understanding the psychology behind the mortgage approval process when you're self-employed and why it seems so much more difficult, because the truth is, it is so much more difficult. But it's about having the right person on your side, and I am interviewing to be that person. So if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, please feel free to reach out. Until then, have an absolutely wonderful week. Please share this podcast with anybody you know who uses this information, and I really appreciate you listening. We'll talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.